And welcome to Tournament Poker Project. My name's Jon.
And I'm Tain.
And we are two recreational poker players. And this is documentation of our journey to get good enough to play at the World Series of Poker. My current bankroll is, well, I've got two. I've splitting this between online and live. My online bankroll is up a little bit from last week. I'm at £121. And my live bankroll is the same as last week at minus 90 because I haven't played any live since last week. What are you saying?
I've lost the use of my laptop and I can't remember where I left it online. I'm going to guess around $100, £100. And then my live winnings were down to 190, probably down to about 120 now, which could be, it was up to almost 300 at one point. So yeah, I'm taking a bit of a beating.
Definitely need to take better care of your bankroll, Tain. Number one rule in poker. You know, you need your spreadsheet.
Yeah, it might be better than that. I just haven't counted it, which is a bit silly when it's a key function of what we're doing.
Cool. Well, look, I think it's fine for now anyway, but we are not professional poker players. We are recreational players. We have decided to go on this journey of poker because we love the game. We've played for, I'd say more seriously for a couple of years, right, Tain? I mean, not, you know, we've still got full-time jobs, but a couple of years of studying or starting to study.
Yeah, I'd say 3 years of actually properly giving a damn.
Yeah, reading. You know, it started off as reading books, and then you listen to a lot of podcasts, and more recently some hand reading, which is what today's pod is going to be all about. But as I say, we're not professionals, so you know, this is just our view on things at our current status of knowledge and skill. So if you do have any comments, please feel free to drop us a note. Okay, let's jump right in. So I've got a hand that I'd like to talk about. This is from a $5 9-seater regular speed sit and go on ACR. So we are down to just 8 players. We've lost someone already. The blinds are just at level 2, so 15 small blind, 30 big blind, and there's an ante of 3 going round as well. So in the pot, at the point the blinds are in, the pot is 69. So we are in the big blind. So we've put our 30 chips in. And the under the gun player called Peak Duke, would you pronounce it like that? Peak Duke? That sounds right. Peace Duke. We'll say Peak Duke.
Peak Duke.
Peak Duke. Under the gun raises 3 times the big blind. He puts 90 chips in. We have 2 folds, and then D Lush from mid position calls the 90, and we have 3 folds. The button folds, the small blind folds. We're sitting on the big blind with Queen 9. So what are your thoughts here? We've had an under the gun open to 3 times the big blind at 90. D Lush, a few spots on calls. We have a fold from the button and the small blind, and we're sitting in the big blind with 2,200 chips, by the way. Peak Duke is not far behind that. And we've got Queen of Clubs, 9 of Spades. Now, one thing I would actually like to say, Peak Duke was an extremely tight player. Like, I actually not sure he'd played any hands up to this point. And his chip stack, you know, we start on 2,000. His chip stack was down to, like 1870 or whatever it was. 1850 or whatever. After we've gone for 1 full round of blinds. So I've got a feeling he hadn't actually played a hand. But he might have just played a small one or whatnot. So it's round to us on the big blind, and we are holding Queen of Clubs, 9 of Spades. What are your thoughts here, Tain?
My thoughts initially would be so the pot's up to 250 effectively. By the time your 60 has gone in, it'll be over 310. Which would mean D Lush, they're not committed to this pot, but their stack to pot ratios by the end of the flop betting, they're going to be committing themselves. But I also don't know how much they think that far into it. They still see that they've got 1.5 grand behind. 90's nothing. They can call that. So just to trying to get D-Lush out the picture. They're calling. I think they're calling that with too wide a range.
So your full press at the moment is on the not the guy that opened, but D-Lush, who's called from mid position. Yeah.
Yeah, only just because I think they're the most irrelevant in the hand at the moment, because they've only called. They're called from mid position. They don't seem to give. Well, there's not too much. If I was D-Lush, there's very little in my range that I'd be just calling a very tight player who's raised under the gun. So I think that their range is a bit ABC.
So can you elaborate on that a little bit? What types of hands do you think he's calling with? Or let's phrase the question another way. What hands would he have probably 3-bet that with that you think are probably now out of his range?
So the very top of the range, you'd hope they were 3-betting. Just because the 90 is also not big enough to just be checking, just be calling in the hope to try to disguise your aces and your kings, if that makes sense. So even though, yes, you would be raising your aces and kings in that position, you also do want to have a few calls in there if you're trying to balance your range and you're trying to show people, actually, I'm not always going to be raising the very best of my hands, just to confuse them a bit more. But at this blind level and at this buy-in, I don't think you should be thinking that deep into it. Just, if you've got aces and you're in D-Lush mid position, raise it. You need to be sticking your 3-bets in there and defining it. I mean, especially if Pique Duke does have a real strong hand, you might get all the chips in. You might be massive. They might consider ace queen suited strong, and all of a sudden you've got aces over ace queen, or even kings, queens. So I'd take away the very top of their range, but I'd also get rid of. Well, if it was me, I'd get rid of most of the crap of their range. So most of their offsuit aces, the worst part of Broadway and below. I'd probably do that with a lot of pocket pairs. So pocket pairs down to 5s. Feels good. And then the suited Broadway is 100%. This is very much a hand that I'd be calling that early raise from, where you don't mind if a few other people were there. You've probably got the best. You've got some blockers, and you can probably get away from a flop that's either got an ace or is rubbish, and all of a sudden the blinds are better. And that kind of thing, it's a lot easier to define a hand like suited Broadway from that position with just a call. That doesn't mean I wouldn't also raise with king queen suited, but that's where I'm at. So that, I think D-Lush is very, very narrow in their range, but the truth is they could easily just be a calling station. They think 90 is a cheap price.
Like, oh yeah, I've got ace 6, I've got an ace in my hand, I'll call that. It's not strong enough for a raise, but I'll call it. Yeah, I see your point there. And what about Pique Duke? So this is the under the gun opener who opened to 3 times the big blind, who's been playing very tight up till now. What's his range from this type of position? Does position come into it at this stake? I mean, it could do, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
It should do. It's just a 3 times the big blind raise, which, when you're only playing 15, 30 blinds, as much as you should mathematically stick to 3 to 5 times the big blinds, my inkling, and I could be wrong about this, it could be a leak, would be that when the blinds are really small, where you've got 100 big blinds in your hands, where everyone's got 100 big blinds in their hands, which they've not got 100, but they're above 50 for a lot of it. You just want to be a little bit pushier, because people do get a bit easy. It's a bit too easy to call. So if I'm under the gun and I've got the hand that
sorry, Tain, what do you mean a bit pushier?
You want more folds. You want to be heads up. So if Pique Duke is waiting for the top 5% of his range, and they've got that and they're now betting out, but they're under the gun, to get the fold you need to be heads up, that 90 bet isn't going to do it, in my opinion. So
yeah, I agree. I think it needs to be a bit bigger.
Yeah, that's what I'd hope. But then I'm also guilty of just auto 3 times big blinds for most of my range. I mean, something I've been looking at, but I've never implemented it because of, well, I don't think I'm good enough to be there just yet, is that I've been reading about how the default is 3 times big blind, and at a certain level of playing, that's a good strategy because it's the same bet all the time. So it is hiding. You know, if you're raising 3 times with 7-6 suited and you're also raising 3 times with aces, it's quite hard for people to generally get a feel for that. But you're leaving way too much value on the table. From things like this, you know, for instance, if you call, they've got a three-way pot that if that was 150, might have been heads up. At which point,
I think that's a really, really interesting point that we're talking about there, because you're talking about the nuances of bet size and how that might affect play versus just being difficult to read because your bet size is always the same. And probably like what one's more valuable to you is, of those two choices, is based on maybe the skill level of the players that you're playing. And it may be that at this skill level, the nuances of bet size aren't going to do as much unless you're kind of really exaggerating it. And actually, by just betting the same 3 big blinds every single open that you do, regardless if you've got aces or, you know, even like a bluff in the right position, maybe that's much more valuable in terms of how it becomes a value to you, you know?
yes, I think I know what you mean. Even at this level, if you've got the ability to adjust your bet size to elicit certain, either to get certain information or to manipulate the hand how you want, even at this level, you should be doing that. The only difficulty is that you have to balance it. If for instance, Peak Duke raises it to 150 and they've got aces, if they never do the same move, if they never raise it to 150 under the gun with suited connectors or a pair of tens, you'll know it's just such an obvious leak that it makes it difficult. So even though in this exact isolated example, raising it to 150 would have been a better move if they've got a premium hand, it doesn't work if you can't balance. And that's the problem with the level that I'm at the moment, where I can't remember enough of my maneuvers to balance it properly. I might do it here and there, but then it will be something like I'm raising 50% of my suited connectors under the gun 5 times the big blind because I can't remember if I'm meant to be doing it 20% or 80%. Yeah, does that make sense? And all of a sudden it's I'm just raising suited connectors all over the place and I'm getting messy.
I think as well. I mean, you really think about that, and that's great, and that's obviously going to set you up really well for the future. Maybe at this level, and no disrespect to the level of players playing at the table, but maybe at this level, people aren't taking quite such notice of the types of hands they're seeing at showdown and remembering every move that you made. And it might be that doing it for balance is good to get in the practice of, but actually at the moment you might just be better off going with the one that's likely to give you the most value in this particular hand, kind of like basing that on, you don't think people are going to know what you did the last time. Do you see what I mean? So you're almost like you don't need to balance because people aren't good enough to exploit you yet. I know there will be the odd one at the table. Does that make sense?
No, I completely get that. And to be fair, we don't play often enough for someone to have that level of memory on us. So that is a good point. And yeah, raising the default 3 times is probably good until there's a compelling reason to raise it more or less.
That's what I was trying to say about, why not just go with the same one each time? Then people are really going to be clueless to what they've got, and they might start considering your position and thinking you've got a tighter range when you raise from an earlier position and whatnot. But I mean, I'm basing this on my level of memory of the players that I'm looking at on this table, and all I remember about any of these players from playing this hand in the last week is that this Peak Duke was playing really tight up to this point. And then I think, well, I certainly don't remember anything. And it might just be that I've not got great concentration to be able to remember that sort of thing. Maybe a lot of other players do this and really remember what people have done in really certain situations to the point where, you know, balancing the way you're describing really is going to be a benefit, because you can catch them out or you can trick them into doing whatever, or just make it very difficult for them to exploit you. But I wonder how their skill level in that compares to mine, because mine's almost non-existent.
Yeah. All right, I feel that. All right, quickly running back into the hands.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm putting Peak Duke at 12% range, roughly. I don't quote me on that because I've not got my Flopzilla to cuddle me at this stage. My laptop's dead.
What sort of hands does that represent then? What have you got? Aces, kings, queens, jacks, tens? All the pairs?
Yeah. I'd say down to tens. I can imagine this move very much from tens. In fact, I like tens and jacks for this kind of not that strong a raise, because no one likes tens and jacks. They're a horrible pair of cards to play. They could do it with slightly weaker pocket pairs. I'm not going to say they don't. Depends how they're feeling. Like, for instance, 9 times out of 10, they wouldn't be raising that with sixes. But if they're the kind of player who's just been, they want to play, they want to bet, but they've had a real rubbish run of cards. They're like, oh, I mean, they've lost 250 chips just folding because it's 10-3 off. 10, Jack 1, Jack 2, that kind of is like, oh, it's exhausting. So you see a pair of sixes, you think, you know what, I'm going to throw in a little bit. I want to play this hand.
Don't care that I'm under the gun. I'm getting some chips in. I want to play. Get them in with my sixes. Yeah, I see that.
So I wouldn't rule it out, but I wouldn't put a lot of credence in that unless you're struggling to match up the rest of the range at that point. So, for instance, if there's a 6 out there and they've been playing it too strong for it to be much else. So it must be they've got a set or something. But otherwise, it's the arrow up in the corner. Yeah, so a couple of suited aces, decent part of the broadways. I think players at this level, because you get a real good mix at $5, you get a good mix of people that are very good, that might be 3-4 tabling, and people that see $5 as throwaway money. So definitely some of the weaker suited aces, but also some of the stronger aces, but unsuited. Ace 10 off. I can see someone doing that with ace 10 off. Again, the fact it's only 3 times the big blind under the gun means maybe it is that kind of hand, but that's about it. They'd have to be a bit more tricky. They probably would have been playing a lot more hands if you're seeing this with 7-8 suited, for instance. I'm not saying they wouldn't, but if you're saying they've not really played any hands, you generally get some nature of suited connectors at some point.
Yeah. Sure.
So I'd assume they're not playing them. The only other thing I'd consider in this point is, are they going to react to a squeeze? The only difficulty is that when you're the big blinds, your squeeze play has a lot less effect, because people then don't interpret it as in the way a squeeze play is meant to. They interpret it as big blind defense, and they're a lot more willing to call you down. So I'll probably
and that feels risky too, Tain. It feels a bit risky because squeezing that position, you're building a big pot against a range that you're considering to be pretty strong. You know, you probably at best you're going to get a call, and then you're going to be seeing a flop with a really big pot, and you're out of position. You're first to act. You know, so it doesn't feel like the correct move to raise or squeeze.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd say, like, for me, where if Peak Duke is that tight, let's just assume they are the absolute tightest. They're only playing 1 in 20 hands, and they're only ever playing 1 in 20 hands. I wouldn't be worried about what happens with the squeeze with them, because when they're playing such a small range, 60% of the boards that come out, 60% of the flops, you can play all over that, and they're not going to be calling you. Even if they've got aces, if it comes out 6, 7, 8 suited, they'll throw their aces away. Like they can't fall in love with them when they've been playing that tight, because they must understand the value of hands. It's more what D-Lush would do, because the last thing you ever want is to try a squeeze play and all of a sudden both players have called, and now you're in a three-way pot out of position and the pot's massive. So yeah, I think you're right. We don't squeeze in this position, but D-Lush is the problem with that, and that makes it a bit awkward as well. Like, because this would be a good. I would like to isolate Peak Duke here, but I don't think we're going to. I think we're just going to call. I don't think you fold, by the way. The fold's off the cards as well.
Okay, so you like the call here. So just to recap quickly, so the M value is 69. That's a small blind of 15, big blind of 30. Antes are 3. We've got 8 players at the table. We're on the big blind. Under the gun has raised 3 times the big blind to 90. We've had a mid-position caller, and we're now sitting here facing a 60 chip bet to call to see the flop with Queen of Clubs, 9 of Spades. So it sounds like you're saying here we want to call this one, right?
Yeah, I mean Queen 9, as much as it's not a great hand, the fact it is a bit iffy means that you can get away from it a lot easier. So even if you hit your queen, if the board's a bit wet, you've got the benefit. All right, I've got a 9 kicker. I'm probably just going to let this go. Whereas if that's like a jack kicker, you're in a bit of that jack might be good enough. I'm not sure where I'm at. What about the straight possibilities? So I think it's bad enough that you're getting good odds, because if you hit either of them cards, you could be good, and you might be against players that don't have that in their range. But also, if the board's wet as anything, you just give it up. You've not committed that many chips. I like it.
And when you say wet, when you say a wet board, what's an example of a wet board?
Yeah, like ace, king, 10. There's 2 suits out there, or even if it's just a board that's really connected, at least 2 of one suit, maybe even 3 of one suit. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so look, we do call, and we go to a flop, 3-handed. So the pot on the flop is 309, and the flop comes 5 of hearts, 8 of hearts, 9 of clubs, and we are holding Queen of Clubs, 9 of Spades. So we've hit the top pair there with a pair of 9s with our queen kicker. There's 2 hearts on the board, and it is quite a dynamic board. There is would you say that's a wet board? It's quite connected. 2 hearts. You've got 5, 8, 9. So the 6, 7 completes a straight already.
It is a semi-wet. I'm making that term up. I'd call that semi-wet, whereby
Moist.
It's what I was saying just at the end of the slightly moist board. Yeah, it's
I was waiting for you to catch on to. We don't call it moist, do we? That's not right, is it?
It's not dripping. It's just it's got a slight tack to it. Basically, because the cards are a bit lower, and at least for Peak Duke, that's not in their range really. And that's what I was saying earlier, that the 9 in your hand, not the queen, because they're all over the queen, but the 9 for Peak Duke, I'm not even sure there's any hands that add 9s. Now, he could have a pair of 9s, but I just think, given that you said how tight they're playing, that is the
absolute. On 10s, didn't you went down to 10s, I think. Okay,
so, and I'll stick with that just for the sake of being consistent. So 9s are there are no 9s in their range, so you're winning here other than their overpairs, but the overpairs are a big part of their range, so I would always proceed with caution. D-Lush, on the other hand, I think they're, with no other information, that they could have annihilated this flop. They could have missed it completely. Don't know, don't have a clue. The only thing I'd hope is that they've noticed that Peak Duke hasn't played, and they've also noticed they're raising under the gun, and that kind of puts a cap on their range a little bit, because they didn't free bet, they just called. It's difficult without knowing what kind of range and percentages they're playing, but at this point, I'd say you're good a lot of the time, but you're losing to their pairs. But I also feel that a bet in this position, coming out betting 2/3 of the pot, half the pot, somewhere around there. I don't feel like a lower than that bet is gonna. Oh, would it get the right information? The fact there's 2 hearts out there and there are 2 opponents means that I would not bet that less than half, because they would be getting pretty good odds. The implied odds from 2 opponents, if you then hit your flush, could be worthwhile. Even though if you're the effective stack and you've only got 1.5 back, the 2 opponents that could be ropey dopey into this, especially if they're betting into you, might be worth the trouble. Only if it's, a third pot, a quarter pot kind of thing. But all the same, I'd be betting here. But if I get a call from Peak Duke, I would be extremely. Yeah, I'm not sure what else I'd do with the hand if it's just a call.
Okay.
If they re-raise me again, we'll see what goes on. But that would be my plan. That this is kind of the only street that I'll get value on. We'll take it from there.
Okay, well, I completely see the logic. I actually elect to check, which is possibly a mistake in hindsight. Peak Duke then bets 120 into the 309 pot, making the pot now 429. D-Lush flat calls with the 120, bumping the pot up to 549. And we now have a decision to make. I don't think we can fold. I mean, we've got top pair with a pretty decent kicker. Do we call or do we raise? Or do you think we fold?
Just thinking through the action so far, the size of the bet from Peak Duke. If we're solid in the 9s aren't part of their range, in fact, and obviously 8s and 5s aren't either, their bet sizing is too small for a semi-wet, moist board for even aces. If I got aces in this position, unless I'm willing to throw them aces away to a bet because I'm that tight a player, I'd be betting more. You know what I mean? Like, I want people. If I've got aces there, I want to look. I'll look at that board and I think if you're playing Jack 10, it's going to cost you a lot of money to hit that queen or that 7. You're going to pay, or same with a flush. I'm going to make sure I'll be potting it. Where if everyone folds at this stage, that's not the worst. But I don't want you seeing any other cards without your money going in the middle. Yeah, I think this gets rid of a lot of their strong pairs. I think it gets rid of all their pairs, actually. I might be wrong about that. They could just be doing a poor bet size in there. But that to me is kind of like an ace king. Mate, it could be suited. It could be that they're playing the draw themselves. It could be they're playing Jack 10 and they think I'm betting a draw to block any further bets. And that would be pretty effective, actually, in this position. So I'm not going to rule them out. But I think I've now got rid of the aces and kings for certain. Yeah, I'd say.
Okay.
Aces, kings, queens are gone.
What do we do here then? Are we calling this?
No, if you're not willing to bet out with top pair, I don't. Let me think through, because I've just defined that you're ahead here, essentially, is where I'm at. Apart from D-Lush, now if we could have such a range. The fact is that D-Lush could be massive in this position, but similarly,
Would
they
he
could
not
draw.
If D-Lush had a set, for instance, say he flat called pre-flop with a pair of 8s, pair of 5s, or even a pair of 9s, would he not now be protecting against the possible straight or the possible flush that's on the board?
I'm gonna.
Go on.
I'm just. I think you're completely right. I think you have to get rid of sets and over pairs again for the same reason as Peak Duke, whereby there is a lot of value in just calling there and that, but I think you need better information on the player that's within their range. And the amount of their range that hasn't hit at this point is still the biggest percentage of what the combos they're playing with. So most of their combos have missed or don't have the best of it. My feeling at this point is that you're ahead. My feeling how it is also at this stage, are you interested in value? Like, is the best outcome here a bet of 500, for instance, that elicits 2 folds? Or is the best bet here, say, for instance, 400, just plucking it out of the air, that gets 1 call and 1 fold? How much? I mean, what other cards could come out that isn't going to scare the life out of you? Like, every single card that I'm thinking of is a poor turn. If a queen comes, I wouldn't have any confidence in that. Another 9, so you've got 2 9s out there. Another 8, another 5. The worst, I don't. D-Lush does have 2 pair in their range, but they're not betting like it, and they've got enough in their. They've got enough in the rest of their range that means it's tiny percent. I don't think there's any cards that can come out that you'd have a huge amount of confidence in. Maybe a 2 or a 3, and that's nothing. You know what I mean? So you can call and hope for the best because it's not overly expensive. A good solid raise at this point, pot kind of raise, could be a good outcome. And the check raise, people feel that that's a strong move. You're showing a real strength there. I from my gut feeling when I saw the action is Pig Duke is putting in a small C bet, got no confidence in it because they're playing a bluff. Throw it in. D-Lush is just calling anything. He could be there with like ace jack off. He could be there with 6-4, and he's waiting for a gut shot, whatever. He's just calling that because all right, let's see what happens. I don't think it. Pot is where I'd put this. I would during the hand, if I was playing this live, I wouldn't be potting it right there. Absolutely certain I wouldn't. But looking back on it, I feel that that's the best move.
Okay, fine. So just to recap, so the flop has come 5 of hearts, 8 of hearts, 9 of clubs. We are out of position, 3-handed to the flop with 9 of spades for top pair and queen of clubs. The initial opener, under the gun opener, has bet out 120 into the 309 pot. The mid position caller pre-flop has now called the flop bet as well for 120, and we have a decision to make on whether we were not folding, whether we call or raise, and what you're saying there, Tain, that we raise that up to about pot.
Yeah, a good pot side, maybe even an overbet, because I feel that even
see where you're at.
An overbet, it wouldn't be the worst thing, because if you get called, it's quite good value. Because if you are still best at this stage, and it could put your opponents in a position where they don't really want to invest much more in the pot because they'd be committed. So you might actually get check, and then all of a sudden you get showdown value with a hand that at this stage I feel is probably the best. Might not be, but
okay. All right. Well, I like your thinking. I do elect to raise. Listening to what you said there, I agreed with a lot of that, and so my raise to 330, which is not even 3 times the bet there of 120, now does feel really quite small, and I don't think it's going to do quite what I wanted it to do. I remember raising this at the time, really just trying to get information. I wasn't too worried about D-Lush. She was just kind of weak, limpy, coolly kind of play, very passive. But Peak Duke, with his under the gun, open, tight player table image, and he's opened pre-flop, he's c-bet on the flop. I wanted to see what he does. This was a bit of I want some more information. I feel like I might be good here. Let's see what happens when I chuck in 330. I was kind of hoping for a fold, I think, from Peak Duke, because I was quite miffed about what he might have at the minute.
Yeah. My gut feeling when I saw 330 was that I'm not sure if your plan for the hand involved this and that size bet. Now, if your plan for the hand was to check raise this, which I think is a good move, I think it's strong. I think it shows good strength against two opponents where one of them is tight and probably has a decent hand, albeit one that's missed. And in that position, you should. I don't think 330 is the check raise value. I don't think it gets enough folds, or it's almost enticing them to come over the top.
Yeah, or call, or call, you know. I mean, yeah, I don't know what I was trying to achieve here. I probably felt like, I don't know. I just remember I wanted information. I didn't think that Peak Duke had a 5 or an 8, and this, you know, might be stringing him along to the river with a pair lower than mine. I think this was well, have you got better than a pair of 9s, or have you not? Have you got that ace king, ace queen? You know, like the range you put him on at the start was very much what I had in my head when I was playing the hand, and I thought this might give me that information.
Yeah, I think they're getting the odds to call for the flush.
That's the problem. Yeah, it's not big enough, and you were right when you said it before we knew what I put in as the raise. It needed to be more like 500, 600.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say I can't get my head around, but you've said it and other people at the poker table have said it enough to me, is that sometimes these bets look like thinly veiled value, and that could scare someone who is super tight. And I have seen it where a big overbet looks like you're trying to push him off the hand, whereas if you're so comfy, you don't care about the flush almost. Or, you know, you can see it. If a heart comes, you're done with a hand. If heart doesn't come, you're just going to keep trying to get chips out of them. And you're not too worried about folds at this stage. Does that make sense? So I still think it's too small, and that even if I thought, oh, he's only in that size raise when he's got a monster.
Yeah. You'd still call it, wouldn't
you? I'd probably still call it, yeah. If I've got
sure.
any connection to that board, if I've got a single heart, for instance, and it's the ace, which might be blocked, yeah, I'd probably call it, and that's the problem, I think.
Right, Tain, I really like your thinking now. I think that's good analysis of the bet sizing, definitely. Peak Duke jams.
Jamming.
D-Lush folds.
Good.
So we are now heads up, and we have a decision which isn't quite our tournament life. We have 1,880 behind, and the bet is 1749, but that's the total bet. We've already put 330 into that, so that leaves 1,429. So we need to put in another 1,429 to win what is currently a 2,500 pot. We have top pair with a queen kicker. What to do?
This is one that I would love to get my head around a lot better, and the only way to do that is practicing with Flopzilla, whereby let's just assume, wild assumption, that your Queen 9 is the best hand at this stage. Does that necessarily mean that your equity in the hand is such that any two overcards haven't got enough equity that it will be a poor choice to call? Because as I say, it's 1,400 going into 2,500, so it's not like you've got a lot of profit for little risk. You are risking a lot to get there. It's a big fat overbet. It's high variance, whatever it is. I would call, because I genuinely do feel like you have the better hands. I'm not ruling out pairs, but your hand can improve to better than pairs anyway. They could have a combo draw, but I think we ruled that out. I don't think that's in their range, apart from maybe Jack 10. They could have a Jack 10 hearts, at which point they're actually ahead in this situation for getting the top pair. Other than you've got a blocker, but it's not going to make much of a difference. It is marginal for me. Looking at the stacks at the table, I don't feel there's anything wrong with folding, and I wouldn't even be too ashamed folding the best hand if you knew somehow. But I also don't think there's any problem with calling. I think their action so far hasn't been to represent pairs. Yeah, that doesn't mean they haven't got them in their range, and this could be you're miles behind. But I do feel that if they're doing that, if they've got pairs, they're doing a real poor job of playing them. If any, they've allowed you to come in with Queen 9. What if the Queen 9 in your hands were hearts? You got top pair and a flush draw. You know what I mean? Like, they could be, again, they could have a pair of aces, and all of a sudden they almost haven't got the best of it, or they've only got marginal best of it, and then all of a sudden they're on a coin flip and they're throwing all their chips in. So yeah.
I mean, I don't feel like he's got 5s or 8s in his range, right? So just a reminder, the flop is 5 of hearts, 8 of hearts, 9 of clubs. We've got the 9 of spades, Queen of clubs in the hole. So we've got top pair, Queen kicker. Is he doing this with complete air, right? This is what I wanted to think about here, right? So we're looking at this from Peak Duke's position. He's not played a hand. He's under the gun. He's put out an open. He's got 2 callers. The flop comes down. First person in front of him checks. He c-bets and gets a caller and then a re-raise to 3 times roughly his bet. And he's now going all in. Is he doing that with complete air? Like, we can kind of say for sure he's not got 5s and 8s, right? Or near to it. So he's either doing it with complete air, 2 overcards, or is there anything else he's doing this with? Is he only got this? Has he only got overcard bluffs in his range now?
I mean, there are hands that were feasibly in their range, and the only reason we're eliminating them is because he hasn't played much. So things like ace 9 suited, we've eliminated because it felt a bit too wide for under the gun playing tight as chips. It's difficult to understand. Like, I don't want to. I keep coming back to the pairs because people play pairs erratically almost because they're not sure what to do with them.
What, like the big pairs, you mean?
Yeah, and not necessarily the aces and kings even, but like if he's sitting there with 10s and he's like, okay, well, you've checked to me, I've got an overpair, I don't want to see any other cards because any ace, king, queen, jack comes and I'm scared. I've got to put these 10s away. I've got the best of it. I've had a raise that I've been squeezed. Can you squeeze on the flop, or is it only pre-flop?
I guess it is a bit like a squeeze on the flop. I don't know, like if a squeeze play to me is always a pre-flop thing, but there's no reason why you can't call it a squeeze if it's still about hand strength, isn't it? And the dynamics of someone flat calling that is then left to play after the original raiser. So yeah could be.
Trying to think, would they do this with ace king off? They'd certainly do the original C bet. Would they now do that? I mean, if they've got the ace of hearts in their hand, and it depends on the level of thinking and how much they know about blockers, where they know you're not making that move with at least the ace high flush.
What, the flush draw with an ace, you mean?
Yeah, if they've got the ace, Yeah, they got the ace of hearts in their hand. There's 2 hearts out there. So even if that's all they've got, and they've just got ace king offsuit, so the best they could hope for is hitting an ace and an ace or a king, and hoping that you've not got ace 9, for instance, or ace 8, which is well within your range, because they know you're not going to be playing to that part of the flush. That you're not doing this with just a flush draw, because you'd always be paranoid that you haven't got the best of that flush draw anyway. You know what I mean, the reverse implied odds could be that you're just paying someone else off for what you think is going to be a good hand. So they could have an overpair, and I'm not going to rule it out. I don't like how they played to this point. If they've got just a pair of tens, a pair of jacks, a pair of aces.
Is that all based on their bet sizing on the flop?
Yeah, a little bit under the gun pre-flop as well. I think a 3 times big blinds under the gun raise with aces is pretty. I think you're inviting trouble for a hand that, yeah, everyone loves aces, but you don't want 6 people in a hand. I mean, he's in a multi-way. Well, they're in a multi-way pot already, and if they've got aces, well, they've only got themselves to blame for that.
If I was Pick Duke and I hadn't played a hand and then got dealt aces, I would be really worried about people just folding, because if I bet, say, like 5 times the big blind and put in like 150, I'd be hating everyone folding and me not getting paid on my aces. When you play that tight, you're kind of desperate for a caller, aren't you? And if it was me and I was kind of sitting there, I hadn't been playing right, I'd been playing too tight, and the aces come along, I might make a bit of a please call me kind of smaller bet. So I personally wouldn't rule it out.
Well, 2 things. First of all, you need to be playing the table. If you're seeing a table that is frequently only going heads up, or is folding to a lot of bets, pre-flop bets, then okay, maybe you want to be playing, your aces just minimally. But also you're out of position. Sorry, if you've got aces and you're under the gun, what you have 8 or 9 handed? 1, 2, 3, 4. It was originally 9 handed, but you're 8 now.
Yeah.
Suck it up. That's just what happens. You know what I mean? You can't be under the gun with 7 other people to act, including the blinds, and worrying that betting 4, 5, 6 times the big blind is going to get folds. The worst thing that could happen is that you get 7 calls. Like, that is absolute devastating.
Because then you're going to pay someone off who hits their 2 pair or whatever. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And your hand can't even improve. You know what I mean? It's really, well, it obviously can, but it's very, very tough for it to improve. And even when it improves, there's a strong possibility someone else is improving better.
So say he has got weak. Say he's got aces there.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Tain, there's 2 ways of looking at it. It's either he's got aces and he just doesn't quite make the right bet size.
Very possible.
Or he's not got aces, or kings or queens or whatever, like that really strong premium pairs.
What I like most about his play in this position is the combo drawers. I'm most attracted to Jack 10 suited. That is lovely getting your money in at that point. You probably got the best of it. Any other Broadway suited, if you're there, the hearts isn't the worst, because you got your over. You'd hope your overcards were live, or at least one of them's going to be live. So if you hit them, it's additional outs. And then you got your fold equity, so you can take that pot right there with a bluff, essentially. So I don't mind any of the combo plays in this position. And yeah, if they've got ace 9, I don't like the play either, really. You've raised it, someone's bet back at you, you've only got top pair ace kicker. I suppose if it is the ace of hearts, that makes a difference. And the only reason I'm considering it is that it's just a tiny bit below their original range that I put them on. And I know you shouldn't go back and adjust the range, but I don't have enough information on the player to know, exactly what they're doing, and I don't think you ever would. Maybe I'm a bit too tight on what I consider a tight under the gun range. But all the same, let's just assume I like the suited connectors or the suited Broadway in this position. I can see someone doing that with just ace king, not hearts, where they see it as two overcards. They can hit either of them overcards. They might be frustrated and just think, you know what, I don't care that I've only got ace king. I've waited ages for this hand.
Could be, yeah, falling in love with the big slick, like that happens definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so decision time then, Tain. What are you doing here? So just to quickly recap on the whole hand, right? So we're on the big blind. We put our 30 chips in. Under the gun, raises 3 times the big blind. There's a caller from mid position, and we call and see a flop with queen 9 offsuit, and the flop comes 5, 8, 9. So we hit top pair, got queen kicker. We check. Original aggressor, pre-flop, bets 120, so about a third of the pot, just over. Mid position, caller, pre-flop, then calls that on the flop. We then raise to 330, and then Peak Duke has just jammed for 1,749 chips. Just on the SPR, because I do like to talk about that for some reason every hand. On the flop, there was 309 in the middle, and the effective stack was that 1749. So you're looking at an SPR of about nearly 6, so 5.5, 6, which is not auto stack off. So auto stack off is like when you see a flop and you've got top pair, you get all your chips in, and that might be that you do it there and then in one bet, or you make the decision that I'm going to bet a little bit now, but the decision is that I'm going to get all my chips in no matter what the play pans out to be. So the SPR tells us it's not an auto stack off hand if we're playing that type of play. But you sometimes do need to throw that out the window, because like you say, you've got maybe not quite as disciplined people at this level. They might be playing a few tables, or they might have had a beer, just don't know. They could just be, oh, my ace king, I've waited 20 hands for this and it's finally come, I'm just getting all my chips in. Especially if, like you say, it's got the ace of hearts, or that's really feasible, yeah, for sure. So that obviously would be considered a bluff hand. How many hands here left in this guy's range, this Peak Duke's range? How many hands are we currently beating, and how many hands are we losing to? And that's tricky to do without Flopzilla, but maybe we could ballpark it.
I'm gonna, because I should take a line. It's so easy to be sitting here analysing the hand and flip flop in between. Oh, he might have a pair, he might not have a pair, because I think a part of me wants to not be wrong. I'm gonna say he has no pairs in his hands. I'd say, for me, if I was in his position, I wouldn't have played a pair that way. And I've got no other information to say he's not the exact replica of me. So I'm going to say he should have played a pair slightly differently. So he's got no pairs in his hand. I'm willing to get that wrong. So, as I said, I don't think 9s and below are in his range either. You're beating everything.
Okay. That sounds like a call to me, baby.
Oh, no, you're not beating everything.
Oh.
Even though you got top pair, if he has Jack 10 suited, I think he's got the better of you still. Even though he hasn't hit, I think equity wise he will be at 55-60%, because he'll have any Jack, any 10, any heart, any queen, any 7.
So any queen, so the queens there's 4, the 7s there's 4, that's 8. Any Jack, there's 3 left, that's 11. Any 10, that's another 3, that's 14. He's got 2 chances to hit that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So he's got more. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So it's almost, plus the hearts. So he's got like 28 out of, say, 45. I don't know if that's an exact the exact way to look at it, but I always estimate there to be 45 cards left in the deck at this point, and he's got 28 of them.
Is it 28 of you? You might have double counted a few there.
No. So it's 14. He's got 14 outs, but he's got 2 shots at those. So,
Oh, right. Gotcha.
and I know, so just approximating, and I know there's probably a bit of maths I'm missing here, but if you've got 2 shots at hitting 14 out of 45, then you've got roughly 28 out of 45 chance of winning the hand. That is obviously, I'll reduce that a little bit because he might hit one of those, but then I hit a queen or a 9. So that does bring it back down the other way, maybe to like 26 out of 45, but it's still over 50%. He's, if he's got Jack 10, then I think he's probably got the equity to just make this bet. It's marginal, like he's not got.
Well, he's got more. He's got over 20 outs. Any ace, any heart. So 2 of hearts comes, that will complete his flush.
Okay, if he's got that as well, yeah, sure.
But just to rack it up, I think he's got about 60%.
Sure, okay.
The only thing that would be a little asterisk to that is he doesn't know that you haven't got a set, which takes away a couple. If the board pairs, for instance, his equity will be eroded because you'll be drawing to the better hand. But that's given how tight he's played. I haven't actually mentioned up to this point what your range is. The fact that you were in the blind and 5'8" and 5'9" is well within your range. So if he was playing aces badly, he's losing anyway. I don't think someone who plays that tight is playing playing level 3 break poker. You generally, what's the point in being able to play level 3 when you're just going to sit there and wait for the best hands? It's just the two don't seem to go together. You generally start to loosen up a little bit when you've got the ability to read the board and read someone else's, what are you thinking I've got, what am I thinking you've got, that kind of thing. So things like him understanding that you've got range advantage at this point, I don't think it's as important as it should be to his action, at least.
So if you can just indulge me for a second, Tain, I want to try and do a little bit of maths on the fly to calculate the expected value. Okay, so you've said there that we think he's got about a 60% chance of winning this hand, which means we've got a 60% chance of losing it. The amount we need to put in to match his bet here is about, give or take, 1,420. So 1,420, we're going to lose 60% of the time. 60% of 1,420 is, I don't think I'm going to be able to work that out very quickly. Let's say about
800.
800. Okay, so there's that 800 figure. Now, 40% of the time we're going to win, and the amount we're going to win is everything that will be in the pot. So 2,500 plus the 1,400 odd, so that's 3,900. So we're going to win 3,900 40% of the time. So 40% of 3,900 is roughly 1,500. 1,500-ish.
15, 16.
So over an infinite number of ways the hands this plays out over, we're going to win 1,500. We're going to win 1,500 and lose 800, giving us an expected value of 700 plus 700. So based on us calculating that he has something like Jack 10, if he's got Jack 10, this only really works if we're basing this on him having Jack 10. We've got a positive EV situation and we should make the call, would you say?
Yes.
But that's based on him having Jack 10. So then I suppose you'd have to look at all the other possible hands he's got, and then maybe look at the expected value of all of those different hands that he could have, and then take an average of those and then see what your overall expected value is against his perceived range.
Yeah, I mean, even if
he's incredibly hard to do, but
if he's got Queen Jack, King Jack of hearts, he's not losing. Well, King Jack actually, he's losing a bit more, but he's not losing that many outs. He might not be aware of it, but his overcards are also outs. So even if he's not got Jack 10, he's got suited other connectors or suited other Broadway. It's still that kind of EV situation. It's more in our favour, so it's even more of a likelihood. So given that they're all within his range, we should dilute that Jack 10 considerably. So this makes it a much better call. One thing for us to consider is how many times are we in a position where not that he can outdraw us, where he's massive over us. I don't know if we did put anything on him being massive over us. We can't really be counterfeit. You know, where we think we're getting the odds and we're actually not getting the odds at all. I think the only really consideration is the King 9, Ace 9, which I've not included in his range, and the pocket pairs, which we've not included in his range at this point.
Okay.
Ace, yeah, no, carry on. That's fine. I'm good with that. I'm happy.
It's tough. So, all right then, Tain, I'm going to press you on this now. What are you doing with this? Are you throwing this away, or are you making the call?
Right here, right now, with all the time in the world, I'd be making the call. I'd say it's a good call. Do it. At the table, it'd be much more emotionally driven as a quick decision.
Yeah.
I probably would still call, but given my stack size and the fact that there's not too much in the pot, I mean, there's 2,500, but if you imagine forgetting the overshove, the pot's only 300 and no, it weren't 300. It is 309, isn't it? I'm trying to work out where it's at. Oh yeah, 600 essentially. If I felt that this was a good table to be at, that I'm bossing the skill level, that I can make up that deficit quite easily, you know, essentially I'll be losing 600 chips. I would have a fold in me, is where I'm going, because when I've made a call with Queen 9, I do that knowing that if I'm in a really tough position, my queen kicker's crap.
You're kind of looking for that too. I think exactly the same when I defend a big blind, or I'm going in a bit light. It's if I hit 2 pair, great, and that's what I'm going for. If I hit top pair, it's not really good enough, you know, unless the SPR is much smaller, less than 3 on the flop. But it's not. It was like nearer to 6, which is a really, really tricky amount, and you shouldn't really be auto stacking off with top pair there. So yeah, I think in that exact same way that when I'm calling with a hand like Queen 9 pre-flop, it's because I want to hit some sort of monster and catch out a tricky player who is probably doing this with, like, you know, that real small percentage, 12% or whatever it is you said that he might have. And they're the type of players that you can take, especially early on when you've got chips, you know, compared to the blind size. You can take a little punt at seeing some flops and seeing if you hit big, because when you do, it's easier to get a whole stack, you know, payment for it. But it also means you need to accept that when you just hit your top pair, maybe you need to fold. That's the hard thing, and it just makes it very, very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, just one last quick running through of where we're seeing the under the gun person. So they're under the gun. They're only playing with a real small percentage of their hands already. Now they've done a 3 times raise. It's the first time they've bet for quite a while. We're only putting them on the top percentage of their hands. They've got 1 call from mid position, and then you called on the button on the big blind, didn't you? Did you call? Or... Yeah, so you've just called.
Yeah, pre-flop, yeah.
My gut feeling would then be that this is a great flop for the big blind.
Yeah, it does feel like at the big blind range here, doesn't it?
Yeah. So let's just assume, because as much as I kind of disregarded that, let's just assume they're aware that this is a good flop for other people. But you've just checked to me, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, I'm going to do a C bet. Okay, I'm going to throw it out. What am I only doing that C bet with? We've got 2 other opponents. There's 2 people who actually haven't even seen what the person who's got position on you is doing, the one in mid position. Are you confident? That bet is just not doing enough. I'm going to be confident and say that C bet is from someone who knows they should C bet, but doesn't have either the confidence or knowledge to know what they're trying to achieve. because it is exactly what happened. Everyone called. So they've not achieved anything unless they're going for value. And unless they've, even with nines, and this is the key thing. Yeah, I'm convincing myself with this. If they've got a pair of nines, you're not getting value off that board. You're giving people the odds to call and outdraw you. That's bad. That's not a good situation. Not only do you want to raise it to get rid of some of them draws and make them pay for it, but get more value. You know what I mean? You've got two opponents. One of them's probably got a piece of it, like they have. Get more chips in. If you'd have bet 240, I think you'd have still called, if not raised. So they would have achieved, twice the size bet. I just don't think you're doing it. I think if the very best hands, if you've got aces in this position, well, more for you. That 120 ain't doing anything, and now people are getting the price to outdraw you. You could never imagine that your strategy in this position is to reshove. So that shove, to me, the overbet, the unnecessariness of it. Yeah, I think they're playing with decent Broadway. Maybe they could have a draw with it. I don't rule it out, but I feel that this is a bluff. And that is my final answer.
Okay, so you're calling. You think this guy's bluffing?
Yeah, bluffing with outs. I think they know they've got outs, but calling with outs.
Well, I could tell you my thinking was almost exactly as yours was, Tain, in terms of I thought they were bluffing. I don't think I ruled out big pairs and stuff, but I just felt like, well, he could have a big pair, but he also could have loads of just overcards, and he's just annoyed that he's
oh man.
Yeah, so I make the call.
I've got a feeling he's got a pair now. You kind of the way you announced that, it might not have.
He flips over kings, pocket kings.
Right.
So yeah, so I mean, I think you had his range. It was in the range at the beginning, and I think you put a lot of emphasis on the flop bet being too small. And I can see your thinking, but I suppose although you shouldn't reevaluate the range and add cards back into it, when he re-raises my re-raise with two players still in the hand with him, maybe that's when we should have said, this does kind of a tight player. Maybe this does point more towards that over that big pocket pair, possibly.
Yeah. And the problem we've got here is that he's made a mistake, but he's got lucky with it, because his mistake could have allowed both you and D-Lush just to call. Okay, and if that next card is a queen, a 10, a jack, a heart, all of a sudden this under the gun player is folding his kings, even if he's still got the best hand. Poor play. And the problem is that that's cost us, unfortunately, because without information that they've made a poor play, that you might have made a different decision. But the truth is, he's got lucky.
Okay, that's interesting, because yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily play it a million miles different to what Peak Duke did, like myself. I understand what you're saying about you don't want draws to get a cheap price, and I know that is right. I've heard that from many people, many podcasts. I'm sure I've read it in books. But does multi-way, the fact that pot was multi-way, play into it a little bit? I've read that you want to make smaller bet sizes when the pot's multi-way. No. Because people are less likely to feel like they need to defend.
Not in this situation.
Because he's the D-Lush, the other guy that was in it, was kind of defending with us. So we kind of both can defend against bets between us. So we're more likely to fold to a smaller bet if we just not got it.
When you're in a multi-way pot, you need to kind of work out, do you want people to fold? Do you want to trim it down? Or is your hand that strong that you can just value even with more than one player in? And the truth is, kings in this position wants folds, at least one fold. I mean, it wouldn't have been the worst if he gets two folds, really, given how connected the board is. He's not getting value with kings. This is not a board for value with just an overpair. There is so much that can come on that turn that is not good for the kings. And as I said, let's just reverse it all. Jack 10 suited is well within your range, and then kings are behind. quite behind in this position. Now the heart is it's not a blocker, but it takes out a little bit of the odds. It also means the queen isn't an out either. Or as well, so Jack 10. It means the Jack and the 10 themselves wouldn't have been out, but they're still playing a flush draw and a straight draw. I mean, even here, you still got 20%. You know what I mean? Like, considering that all you got is top pair and naff kicker, there's still good equity for you.
It's
not
tough.
enough for the call.
It's a tough one because there's two things there's two things in my head at the moment to consider when you've got pocket kings and the flop's quite dynamic. The flop kind of favours the big blind range. Like at 5, 8, 9, it's quite a dynamic board. It's more of an hour. I mean, we've hit it. It's kind of case in point. We've got that queen 9. We could have like 6, 7, 7, 8, 8, 9. We could have all of these hands. That flop is definitely suits our range more than it does the under the gun opener. So with that in mind, and he's betting out, knowing possibly if he understands ranges, knowing that that's more our range, should we have maybe considered, okay, well, seeing as this is our range, he's betting out, make the bet I made, see where we're at, and probably a bigger one would have been better. The re-raises should have been more to fight like 500 on the flop from us. But once he then goes all in, do we then say, okay, he's got it? Like, we've asked the question, we've said, are you just c-betting with ace, king, ace, queen? This is our range. We're going to bet way above you here. We want some information. Jam, he jams it in. Is that not the answer that to my question that I asked with my raise on the flop there? And I got the answer, and then I called anyway. You could look at it like that, and that's kind of how I felt about the hand afterwards, and still do. I still feel like I asked the question at the right time, but just didn't ask it well enough. I should have put maybe a few more chips in to be certain that a jam is really, really strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think you evaluating that doing the raise could have been stronger, because in the same way their 120 bet didn't get any new information. I mean, it weren't a value bet, but they weren't getting folds either. I also feel that your raise didn't get enough information. But I disagree with your probe bet got the answer, because I don't think it did as such. Okay. Because when someone calls your probe bet is when you got your answer, because you can't bluff with a call. It's when someone shoves over the top that all of a sudden bluffs are back in their range. Does that make sense? So you put a probe bet out and someone calls, the answer to that is, I've got a strong enough hand that I don't need to try to shove you off it. Yeah.
Okay.
So a good probe bet, a good 2 bet, and if that had then been called, I'd have been worried. The fact that they've re-raised means I'm actually less worried, because they would do that with a wider part of their range that missed.
I've lost you there. Let's just say that again. So if you're talking about villain or hero.
So if you're the hero, they've done the 120 bet. You've re-raised it.
What, the villain's done the 120 bet?
Villain's done 120 bet. You've re-raised it to 500, let's just say.
Yeah.
If they just call that, I'd be worried. Or even just the action as it's been. So you've raised it to 330. If they'd have just called that, I'd have put them on a much stronger range of hand. I'd say they probably did have some of the pairs. I'd probably say that some of their draws were definitely in there, because you can't bluff with a call. So once they've called, they've told you, I've seen the fact that you've raised it and that you're showing strength, and I'm telling you I've got as much strength as you've got, if not more. Yeah. When they re-raise it all in, as much as that's strength, it polarizes their range. They're not doing that with the mid part of their range anymore. They're either doing it with the best of their range or with complete bluffs. And that means that actually I'm a bit less scared, especially if I felt that the action to that point meant that they shouldn't, that doing that with pairs isn't as likely.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that makes perfect sense, and I get that, and I think it's a really good point, and it does the trick. It's a good bet because it really it's a good bet either way, whether it was a bluff from him or, as we know, he's got the kings. Polarizing your hand in that way really puts the decision on us, and it makes it a really hard decision. It was practically our tournament life. It completely crippled our stack, and it's good to put your opponent in positions where they're scratching their head and they really don't know what to do, and their tournament life's on the line. It's polarizing is good for that reason. So I like his jam here. I think it was good, because one way or the other, he's either getting a fold from a better hand or he's getting paid with his big pair. Obviously, he could have been bluffing and then bluffed all his chips away to me, but he kind of figured it would probably be quite hard for me to call with even top pair, given his tight play so far, given the action so far. So it could have been a well calculated bluff. So the polarization there of the jam, re-raise from him is, I think it's good. Well, it done the trick anyway, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if I had Flopzilla, I'd be cranking in, just trying to see how much of our range he's either behind on or he's not getting the equity he thinks he is. As I said, like with the Jack 10 suited, just because, as much as for the most part his jam is pretty good, there is a lot of, because you're the big blinds, there is a lot of things like two pairs, sets, etc., that, and combo draws. I mean, like 6-7 of hearts, I think it's well within your range. You know what I mean? Like their action up to this point and then the final jam might not actually be that great. If they were genuinely playing your range, that's a pretty risky move. So I'm not convinced that this overbet jam is as value as good and as value as it seems. It's, I mean, when you look at the boards, one of the things is when you look at the board and you got a pair of kings, and then, the ball connects a little bit, but you've got the overcards. You think, okay, well, I'm going to have the best of it in this position. I don't mind all my chips going in. The truth is, when you start looking at the kind of hands that we could be calling with in this position, and the fact that you've shown some strength. I mean, you've called the pre-flop raise, and then you've re-raised me out of position post-flop. Why wouldn't I have considered that you might have two pair or a strong draw? You're not folding two pair, and there's a lot of draws. There's a lot of draws that you're not folding as well. So, but maybe it could be that this under the gun player is happy with that. They don't mind a coin flip at that point. 60-40s, they don't mind. They think that, I've got the king, maybe. I don't know. King of hearts. The back door is a possibility. I don't know. But anyway, I'm not convinced that the kings were moving. I don't feel that they've played particularly well. And a few of their flaws they've got lucky on. And in many other positions, they would have got really unstuck with that hand in this position. If they played that 100 times, I think that they'd be leaving a lot of value on the table, or actually losing quite a considerable number of hands. I would not be surprised, looking at that board, that D-Lush isn't kicking himself or herself right now. For throwing away what could be the best hand.
Yeah, so just for the run out, just for the listeners, the run out ended up, we had a 4 on the turn and a 7 on the river. So there's a very, very straighty board in the.
Yeah, I had to triple check it weren't actually a straight there. It was like, wait. Shouldn't that be split pot? No, it's not.
No.
Missing 6.
no other hearts, so there was no possible flush, but there was a potential straight. Okay, Tain, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Just on the bet sizing, I think there's a lot that I've commented on, but I'm not convinced of my actions, if that makes sense. So, for instance, me saying you should do a bigger bet there if you got this hand, that hand, or the C bet should have been stronger, or you need to be protecting this, you need to be protecting that. I'm not 100% convinced that what I'm saying is true, but at the moment in my stage of play, I'd want to be more convinced of what I'm protecting against. So I would do that. Whereas I don't know, for instance, where. So let's look at this board, and it's 5, 8, 9. There's 2 hearts out there. I don't know the value in saying, okay, I don't mind that you're going to get the odds to call, because that's going to inflate the board, and I know exactly what cards I don't want to see. So if I'm putting you on Jack 10 or 10 Queen or something, or heaven forbid you're actually putting me on 6, 7. Well, you're drawing dead at that point, but if I mean we're 6, 6, 4,
yeah,
where you've got gut shots or you've got open ended. Well, as long as that card doesn't complete on the turn or the river, I'm taking all these chips. I don't know the value of that, even though you're getting the odds to make that call, because we're in tournament play, because ICM's a factor, because you don't need to replicate this position 100 times. If it wins in this occasion and you can get more chips, it makes it actually profitable to give you them odds, because you're going to keep donking chips off, especially if I feel that you're going to have a bluff bet. You're the type of player to bet when you miss your bluff. All of a sudden, it's profitable to give you the odds. So I'm talking about all these bet sizes, but there's a lot that I don't know about.
Yeah, I think it's tricky, isn't it? It's knowing, what kind of you should factor in more, because there's lots of different ways of looking at, or lots of different things to consider at each decision, and it's knowing which one sort of weighs heavier than another in certain situations. And so talking about what you've just said there, if you've got pocket kings, you've raised, you've got 2 callers, right? You see a flop that is 5, 8, 9, so it's quite dynamic. You've got, it's quite connected. There could already be a straight. There's a flush draw out there with 2 hearts, and the range really suits your opponent, who's in the big blind, who's just flat called. He could well have a piece of it already, or have a gut shot, or have the straight even already. So say you did bet bigger with your pocket kings on the flop, and you say let's go really big, and he bets pot, right? So the pot's 309, and he bets 309, and then D-lush folds, let's say, and then you flat call. When a card comes that completes straights, like say a 6 or a 7 hits, or 6 or a 7. Let's just go with a 6 or a 7 hits, or a queen hits and completes a bigger straight. What's the pocket kings doing now? Because you're playing it like you just want to defend against those hands. When one of those hands looks like it completes, are we then folding to a big bet with the pocket kings?
I mean, the benefit of position is the most valuable part for the kings in that scenario, whereby you showed last hand that you have a check raise. If the straight or flush completes and you come out betting, it depends on the value of that bet. There's raise sizes that you would call.
Yeah, so say I jammed, say a 6 comes, and then the big blind jams, the pocket kings folding.
They should, yeah.
And
because I mean that'll be a heavily connected board, and if you put in someone on that kind of hand, you can't then ignore that. If you're going to ignore that, just raise them all in straight off. Don't wait for the card to come that's the worst card that you can imagine and then still call it. At least get some fold equity by pushing beforehand. You know what I mean? You be that person. If the 6 comes and I get checked to, I can guarantee there's never a time that I'm raising it. I'm just gonna have to let that river come and hope that's not yet another card that makes straights or flushes. Because you've already shown you're going to check raise. And whether that was a bluff or an actual maneuver with a decent hand, I'm not going to walk into it again when there's actually stuff that you're really representing there that puts me, all over the place. But you should. I mean, yeah. Even just looking at that board, that 4 would make it a really difficult continuation for Kings. I'm not saying it's not within them to do that, but maybe that's what the Kings were thinking in this position. That's a really wet connected board. I'm just going to jam it in because I can't. Most cards that can come, I'm unhappy with. If an ace comes, I'm unhappy.
Yeah, just
Queen
jam it
comes.
in and close my eyes and hope that
hope
that they're not too connected and that there's not really much that can beat me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually feels like a marginal hand, which is really interesting. When your opponent has the range advantage, if you're sitting there with pocket kings and a flop comes down that's 5, 8, 9, and you're looking at a big blind calling range, that is the big blind's range. That it's definitely
lovely,
they've got range advantage. So all of a sudden your kings does become a more of a marginal hand. It's quite interesting.
Just don't get why you just bet that pathetic less than a third pot.
Well, it worked, didn't it? You had stupid players like me thinking, I'll just raise him up and then call his massive jam.
Well, no, that's not. I think it is what I'm saying. Like, he got lucky with that because it's just as easily you could have had both you and D Lush just call.
Yeah.
Right. And we did discuss the merits of just calling. It was quite cheap. You're getting the good odds to do that. The only reason that you were just calling is that you didn't just call is because you had top pair. If you change that 9 to an 8 or a 10, so you're playing for a gut shot, you ain't doing the action that you did. And they're just one card out. They're just one little notch. So they're as much in your range as these two are. Yet then all of a sudden he's miles away. Yeah, I mean, all of a sudden he's letting 2 people very cheaply draw to better hands.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, like that's just one thing. Like it was a mistake of theirs, and it almost come back and bit them. They just got lucky with the Kings in the end.
Yeah, sure. Okay. No, I like your thinking.
No.
All right. Well, look, I think that just about wraps it up for this week. I really enjoyed that again, Tain. I think, we managed to make a pre-flop and a flop bit of action last, I don't even know, like an hour and a half, whatever this is in recording. But I think that's great. As we discussed a lot of aspects of thinking there, like what, we're looking at it from each person's perspective. And I think that's a really good way to do it. I heard actually today, or was it yesterday, on another podcast about someone that actually they used to, like, they had a deck of cards and poker chips, and they'd actually deal out 10 cards and then literally go and played each hand, go around the table, right, what would I do here with the action that I've seen in front of me, and just keep putting themselves in all those positions. And what a great way to learn, like thinking about every single position for every hand that you're dealing and the different perspectives and how they interact with each other. It's almost like you're doing a manual live version of one of these modern day solvers, just on a much smaller scale.
Yeah. Although how can you say, like, would under the gun raise with suited connectors in this position? Because you know the answer. He's like, no, I know that guy. That guy never raises under the gun with suited connectors. Because
that's exactly my point. That's exactly my point. When you're sitting there considering, what could this other person have? Well, you've just sat there and been that other person and considered, and you know what that range is, and it's almost like teaching you ranging, just in a very manual way. And I imagine if you do that over and over and over again, you start to hone down and see what the better plays are and see what type of ranges in what positions work. And yeah.
Well, that's something I do want us to talk about in the future, whereby one of the things that I struggle with at the moment is kind of, it's difficult for me to pick a single line of thinking for certain players. And the truth is that no one ever will take what I bestow on them as their single line of thinking. But I should at least be able to see some of their action and use that to define how I'm judging them. Does that make sense? So as I said, so for instance, in this hand that we've just looked through, the villain should now know that you're the type of player who's got a check raise in them. So they should be aware of re-raising you, because you can come back at them in a hand where all you've got is top pair, moderate kicker, moderate to weak, no flush draw, no straight draws, even though they're on the board. So you're not the type of player they're going to be betting small and luring you in. If you've just checked to them, maybe check behind, or only do that when you've got much more strength. And then that's a lot easier line for me to take on that player. Whereas at the moment, I'm kind of, they've been playing tight. I don't know if that means that they'll be protecting. I don't know if that means that they'll be check raising. I don't know how many bluffs they'll have in their range at this point. Yeah, just because I'm still not picking up on enough information from elsewhere.
Okay.
We'll get to that. We'll get to it. It'll come.
Another couple of years, Tain, we'll be in Vegas.
We'll be in Vegas.
For sure.
It'll be for work or something, won't it?
For work, yeah. We'll just be dealing on something.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, thanks again, Tain, and thanks so much to the listeners for listening in. I hope you got as much out of that as I did. And till next time, take care.
Yes. Thanks, folks.